Welcome to The Exchange, a series of insightful conversations about culture, community, and corporate life with some of the top leaders from Wells Fargo. I am your host, Marco Hansel, and today we are going to be talking about education, the engine of success. We're going to discuss the barriers that diverse students face in education and ways to support these students in their path to having a successful career. And I've got a set of amazing guests right now. With me is Gene Washington, Jenny Broso, and Javier Puentes. I'll have each of you introduce yourselves, tell us your name, your role at Wells Fargo, and then a special thing, I want to hear 3 words to describe how you're feeling about this conversation today. So why don't you kick us off, Gene?
Sure, thank you, Marco. Hi, I'm Jean Washington. I lead marketing for the commercial bank here at Wells Fargo. I've been in marketing in financial services for over 20 years, always in the corporate space. And how I'm feeling about the conversation today, I would say in 3 words, um, fired up to discuss.
Awesome. Thank you, Gene. I was 4, but we'll accept it.
I know.
All right, Jenny.
Sure, Jenny Broso. I have been with Wells Fargo for 18 years. I support and lead the affluent diverse segments. So I'm responsible for making sure that we are serving diverse segments, not just in the low to moderate income space, but that we're also serving them as we try to bridge their financial equity and as they move up in their affluency stages. I would say 3 words to describe how I'm feeling about today is excited, energized, and interested to learn from some of my peers on the call. And I know that's way more than 3.
Way more.
Way more.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We're having diverse approaches towards how we answer the question, too.
To the number 3, yes.
Yeah. All right. Javier.
Hey, Marco. My name is Javier Puentes, and I oversee the regional services team. My team's responsible for helping mitigate risk within the 4 walls of a retail branch. Been with the bank for about 23 years now, and believe it or not, this year I'll be celebrating, and I'm dating myself, 39 years in the financial services industry, primarily in branch banking. And I'm really excited to be here. I know that that's beyond the 3 words, but I'll say I'm feeling great.
Thank you. Thank you all. Well, this is going to be a fun conversation. We had a little bit of a preview in the green room. I want to start off with a big, like, heavy hitter to kick us off here. Just the most important lesson that you gained from your educational experience, and how has that translated into your professional career? And Gene, why don't you kick us off with that?
Oh, there's so many lessons that I could take from education over the years, and the impact that it's made on my career. I would just start by saying that my family has always really had a high value on education. I feel very fortunate in that way. My grandparents didn't get a formal education growing up, but they always encouraged my mother, me and all of my cousins, their grandkids, to get an education. So it was something that was always a goal of mine from a very young age, something that I placed a lot of value on. And so that, I think, just thirst to learn, thirst to always be questioning and learning more has just been a thread throughout my life. If I had to pick one lesson, I think it would have to be when I was in college. I studied languages and I studied abroad for a year. And that experience is just all about learning. It's all about learning, not just in the classroom, but how to navigate in a different country, in a different culture, in a different language. And I think that really shapes how I think about diversity, even to this day at work, because I was the odd person out. I was studying in Japan, so you can imagine just not only being an American, but an African American woman in Japan. I was
Mm.
always the odd one out. And so I think in my life, I look at work situations, teams, and and look at who's the odd one out, and are we getting that person's point of view and perspective,
Yeah.
and not just going along with what the majority says. So I think that would be
Uh,
the lesson I would pick.
oh yes, that's powerful. I love that. I love the juiciness of like that, the odd one out seeking it and finding that person to find the counter to the consistency of the sameness. So that's
That's
a
right.
beautiful lesson. Love that. Um, Javier.
I'm probably going to stick out amongst my peers here because I was one that didn't take the traditional path of going on to college after high school. I was knee deep into what I would call my career in banking at the time. And although to me, education is critically important, at the time, like I said, I was just entrenched in learning, the job and the role, being a baby boomer, always being a hard worker, and you know, college wasn't for me at the time. But that being said, I do place a high importance on furthering your education. So uh, within my role as a district manager, I seeked out an opportunity to go on to take on a executive banking course out of the University of Virginia. It was a 3-year program, and I found it extremely rewarding. So again, although I didn't take the traditional path, I still believe that higher education is critical in this current environment.
Yeah, more than one way to get there. I think it's interesting because there's a connotation, even I feel, of the difference between like knowledge is power and like education is essential. I automatically associate education to this more traditional approach, but it's like, how are you gathering the knowledge? And you, as it sounds like, gained a lot of that on the job knowledge, and then
Mhm.
went on to find a more sort of non-traditional ways to approach that. So that's really awesome. Thank you for that share. And Jenny, lessons for us.
Sure. I'm going to bridge a little bit between Jean and Javier around. I have formal education. I have a degree in accounting. Have I used it much? No. I mean, I look at the financials, et cetera, but it's not something I've really leveraged in my career. I did it more for the broader background of understanding business management. So, with that said, I would say the lesson that I've really learned has really come down from real world, how we learn in our roles, and really how we learn not just from senior leaders, but more so from people who are on the front lines. I think I have gained most of my critical knowledge from people that are customer facing, people that are presenting products, people that are hearing feedback from the customers day in, day out. And so that to me is foundational. You can have formal education, you can have extended training, you can have additional training, but the real learnings for me, at least here at Wells Fargo, has been about learning from the people who are working with the customers directly, and making sure that I continue to reinforce that with my team, that you're trying to, reach the next level, find the next role, that you should always go back to the people that are customer facing. So that's the biggest piece of education I think that I've gained.
Awesome. I love this. Um, Gene, I want to pick on you for a moment here and give you sort of an open-ended one. What do you think is the importance of, in this case, that more traditional route, and just sort of a response to what you heard from Javier and Jenny?
I was thinking about that actually because I see merit to both paths, right?
Mhm.
Like I said, there was always an emphasis in my family on traditional education. And for me, it really was a bridge. I started my career in the government, the US government, as a linguist. I knew I wanted to go into marketing. And so by getting a graduate degree, my MBA, I was able to make that jump. It was an easy way, let's say, to make that jump.
Mhm.
And, having the formal education, even more than what I learned in the classroom that I'm able to use in my work every day, I would say just the interaction with people, the networking.
Mhm.
In many ways, that was my best teacher. The best
Yeah.
professor that I had was my fellow classmates. and being able to lean on that network when I needed support or needed to learn about something that I hadn't experienced before. And so I find that true in work as well and with my team. One of the things I love about marketing is it's always changing, it's always evolving. So I'm always encouraging my team to learn more. I'm trying to learn more and always be a student. And that's not formal classroom. That's a lot of that is like what Jenny said. It's by listening to people on the front lines or interacting with
Mhm.
customers. You can't be an effective marketer if you don't understand what customers' needs are and preferences are. And so a lot of it is also just by listening to your coworkers, the partners that we work with in the business, getting those perspectives. That's just as valuable as formal education.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, what I'm hearing here, the common thread between all three of you is like there's this idea of education for the sake of education. Like, yeah, go to college because that's what you need to do. That's what you're supposed to do. And then there's like well, what are you doing it for? Like, what's your intention and what are you actually taking away from those experiences and soaking up? And in the context of what looks like a college situation, it's like, you've got the network of people, you've got the real world experience, you've got the internships, you've got all these different elements, and you can sort of mix and match and find that with or without that experience, you can still have those types of integrations come to you, right? And that's it's pretty powerful. So I want to take a little twist here and narrow the field a little bit more, not just from education in general, but thinking about something that I think we'll hit on some of the stuff about like why is it important to our families when it comes to particularly the importance of education for Latinos and African Americans. Why do you think education is important for those communities?
I'll start with that one, Marco. I think it's critically important from the standpoint that being second generation Hispanic, as an example. I think that for the most part, when I think of my generation, at least from my perspective, folks did not take, like I said, originally the traditional path. But what I'm finding in today's environment is that families and folks like myself and my I would just say my brothers and sisters and extended family, they're all encouraging um, our kids, as an example, to attend college. I think it's not even I would say a no-brainer. It's something that now is discussed. That you will further your education because you do need that opportunity. And I wouldn't say it's an advantage, but it's to be exposed to something different that you're outside of what you've been accustomed to, and take advantage of those opportunities. And I think it's already been said, the networking. And as an example, when I think about the networking that took place when I went to banking school, I still have those connections today and connect with my fellow students, and it plays a role in everything that I do today. So having that extended family, and I think Jenny kind of mentioned this a little bit, having that extended family there as a result of having gone to college, and then having your current family here within the organization. And I think it's a win-win when you have both of them in your hip pocket.
I think there is an expectation, and I think there's an expectation because there was never an expectation across society that Hispanics and African Americans would go to school. And I think while I do value, the non-traditional education as much as I value traditional education, I also am cognizant of the fact that you have an easier way into a job with a degree. And so it doesn't, a degree doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be successful, but it does guarantee in some cases at least a look from a company when they're requiring a degree. And so part of why, currently in my family, I'm stressing the importance of my son going to school in 2 years. He's very much of the mindset, if you look at his grades, he does really well in some of the courses that are real life courses, real life applicability, things he enjoys. He doesn't do so well in the other courses, but the point is that whether he wants to go to college or not, going to college is going to give him an advantage. And I think we are now at a point where, back to my earlier comment, we're beating the expectations of Hispanics, Latinos, African Americans not being educated. And so it's important for those of us who have had to go through corporate America with this stereotype and the stigma to make sure that we position our families, our children, grandchildren in the future for success, at least to get some sort of, not be passed over by companies.
I think formal education is important for diverse communities, Latinx community, African American community, just to have exposure to what's possible. It's sort of a safe zone for you to explore, what am I interested in? What could I potentially pursue a career in that maybe you're not getting anywhere else? And I think that's important because if you're not seeing a lot of role models, people that look like you in these jobs or in these careers or in these companies, school is a way to start to get that understanding of, hey, I think I could be good at this. I think I could make a career of this. Um, like I said, in sort of a safe space, and get that confidence to pursue that if you weren't fortunate enough to have someone in your family or someone in your community to role model that for you. And so I think that's a lot of what's important about education for our communities is just that exposure.
Oh, I love that. And I want to bring up something that you just mentioned that just came up for me. You talked about not seeing a lot of role models in your career. Going into the actual college experience, I know that for me personally, I actually had a big struggle, right? I went into college and I'm like, I look around left and right. I'm like, oh, I'm the only person that looks like me. And it became like a very shocking, sort of scary thing. And there was a part of me almost feeling like I wasn't going to make it through college because I felt very isolated. Like our school had like about 2% like Latinos and African Americans in the entire college, right? It's a top tier school. So there's a lot of challenges also that come with potentially being that trailblazer and being that only one. And I'd love for you all to give us some perspective on what you believe are some of the barriers that Latinos and African Americans could face when wanting to go to get that higher education and get that college degree. And Javier, I mean, I think I'd love for you to kick us off because obviously you ended up taking a different route.
From an acceptance standpoint, just like what you just mentioned earlier, right? You take a look at the numbers, right? So you think that you're the minority, right? Well, you're applying for these positions. I know for me personally, I was honestly, I think one of the barriers was that I was kind of nervous and scared. I didn't know about college across the board. My parents didn't really push the idea of going to college, but when I thought about it, I got really nervous because I thought about acceptance, and by saying acceptance, where would I apply and how would I apply, right? So it's not just acceptance; it's the whole process that you now go through, as you all know, to get accepted to a college. You can't just apply to one; you got to apply to multiple schools and have the appropriate GPA. And so that kind of scared me personally, and that's kind of what prevented me from moving forward. So I would say that was just a personal barrier on my behalf, and I think that others may feel the same way.
I think there's a fear of how our parents will save for college. I think we as financial institutions don't do enough to educate them about 529s and investments. There's two components. Diverse customers, generally speaking, don't trust financial institutions. So now you have this big wall of trust that you have to get past. And then when they think of financial institutions, we often talk to them about checking and savings. We don't spend enough time talking to people about investments or 529s before they're ready. And then by the time it's important, it's too late. So I think that's a barrier because to comprehend how they could possibly save for college, is it's overwhelming to them. But we don't do them any favors by not having the conversations with them as their children are, being born. We avoid the conversations until we have the money, and that's probably too late in their life and financial life cycle. So I think that's a significant barrier. In fact, I know Wells is looking at how we make 529 feel less scary. It's an investment, and I think part of our job is to make sure they understand how a small amount every month can actually grow into something that can help pay for college.
Jenny, you bring up a really good point. I'll just share from my experience. That was one of the very first things when we were thinking about having a family. It was about college. What do we need to be doing today to help our kids to be successful? And that was the very first thing my wife and I thought about. We thought about the kids going off to college, and will we have the financial means to do that, where they have an option. And some, to your point, Jenny, don't have that option because the financial component of it is not there. So that was the very first thing we did. I remember when Jessica was a year old, we opened up the 529 right out of the gate. And I'll tell you, with all my brothers and anyone that I could talk to, I would just champion the 529 program to kind of help in that savings. So when the kids got older, or their kids got older, they have options.
The other thing I would add just quickly is the importance of scholarships and fellowships and the number of programs that are out there now for that encourage diversity, to get more diverse students to go to college. I was a child of a single mother. There was no way I could have afforded school on my own or with my family. So all my education was funded by scholarships. And I don't want to date myself, but we didn't have the internet. It wasn't as easy to search for those opportunities when I was applying to school. And now all of that information is readily available online. Students can also network with other students to find out about opportunities and things that they don't know about, to fund college so they don't have to take on that debt. If even through savings through 529 isn't an option.
We start talking about college and saving for college and scholarships their junior year of high school. I mean, why are we not talking and helping parents understand when their kids are in elementary, like this could be what you could save if you just put $100 a month, right? And I'm not saying everybody has access to that additional $100 a month, but if we were to talk to them then versus having parents meetings like I'm going through right now about college during their junior year, I wonder if we could make more impact just so they could see that it's achievable with little small incremental components.
I'll raise my hand on this. One of the things that I was noticing in this whole conversation, 529. I don't even know what that is, right? Like, just to put that into perspective. So I got my scholarships, and my scholarships covered the $45,000 like yearly nut for this college, but still had to have loans, just to live through college as well. So there's this educational component, it sounds like, around financial literacy that's hugely missing, right? And how do we bridge that gap? What do we do about that?
Right. We had a meeting today actually to talk about it for the Consumer Banking Diverse Segments Leadership Team, and we talked about how do we make it, investments in general are just a very common unknown across many Hispanics and African Americans. And so, we want to stand up an effort to bring it forward, bring it into some of the financial health conversations. How tactically we're going to execute that, I'm not sure, but I know that we often assume investments is intended for wealthy clients or people who have more money. We have to start breaking down that conversation. It's about talking to people before they are affluent, or talking to people who are having children, talking to people about life events, not about how much money they have. I just think it's changing the conversation. It's not about offering a product in that moment in time. It's about educating them so that they can make choices around what makes sense for their family right now.
I'll just say we have tremendous opportunity in branch banking, right? That's part of the sitting down with the customer and asking those high impact questions on what's important to them. Do they have children? What's their plan for them, moving forward, and having those robust conversations about what's important to them now, and providing them and sharing the different services that we offer here within the organization that can help them be successful in their planning strategy if education is part of that discussion for their kids.
Yeah, and I would just add that I'd like to see schools and companies take more of a responsibility in this as well. I feel like, in other countries, it's much easier to get higher education for little money or for free. And so I feel like there's a responsibility of schools to take a look at, again, the diversity of students that are going there, and some of them are going to need to work. Some of them won't be able to go full time, and making that possible and making that acceptable. I know at my business school that there was a very strong part-time evening MBA program precisely for people who couldn't just quit their job for 2 years and go to school. And I think, I was part of a program in college where the government paid for me to go to school and study a field that they had a need for, and then in return, I worked for them when I graduated. That's something that companies can do too, to help encourage and get diverse talent that they need, but help provide that pathway financially for more people to go to school.
It's not just about saving for college. It's that I have to continue helping my family with their income as I go off to college. So it would be great if universities acknowledged or honored those that were working in any industry while they're going to school, as long as, maybe there's a partnership with their employer who is providing feedback on how they're performing at work. But to assume that life is separated into school and then into work doesn't benefit the diverse communities either. And I, something like that type of program where we share that we acknowledge you have to work, and we also acknowledge you have to go to school, and we don't necessarily think you have to graduate in 4 years, but we're going to give you a few credits every semester for every semester you work. I mean, imagine how powerful that would be to honor and celebrate and recognize the work that they're doing outside of the classroom.
Wow. I love that. Like recognizing that we're having diverse lifestyles and diverse living experiences too at the same time.
And real life. I mean, it doesn't have to apply to diverse, but it's the reality for many students in college.
How do we support that? It's interesting because I think I love what we brought up about the responsibility of the schools, the corporate, like there's so many additional layers here before we even get to figuring out like, all right, well, how do we educate them from a literacy standpoint? It's like, how does this stuff become more accessible and more flexible, even in the way that it's approached? Because like the reality is the scholarships that I've received and some that you might have received as well, Gene, is like, there's only a small number of students that get to have that opportunity. So if I hadn't gotten that, my parents didn't have an extra $45,000 to spend on college. It wasn't a possibility. So it's like, where does it go? Yeah.
Yes. Completely agree.
So I'd love for us to transition for a moment and dive into individual support. So we've talked about corporate support. We've talked about schools changing, the way that they approach education. What about individuals? What about mentorship for Latinos and African-American students? Has anybody experienced being a mentor or receiving that mentorship?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that leaders take on the role of some level of mentor-mentee relationships. I think it's absolutely critical. I think as a leader, we have a fiduciary responsibility to mentor our up-and-coming leaders and part of that discussion could involve discussions about further education. I personally have mentored a few folks in a nonprofit organization that I'm associated with, and that's another thing is being part of your local community. I've been part of this nonprofit organization for approximately 23 years now, and have taken on, as I mentioned, two mentorships where guiding that young individual at the time into where she's at today. As an example, she wasn't sure whether or not she wanted to move forward. She was part of our program since she was, I think, probably about 15. And I'm happy to say that she's a graduate out of Stanford University. So there's a success story right there.
I've been on both ends. I've been a mentee and I've been, mentored by several great leaders. And I'm also I have 7 mentees right now. I have this inability to say no. And I think part of mentoring is also telling your own story, right? Telling your story, because a lot of people, once you become a mentor, they assume that you've just always been successful, right? Well, you haven't. You had to go through the same struggles, if not bigger struggles. So telling your story of both from a life personal perspective as well as a career perspective, what you went through, some of the real challenges you went through, everything from very specific, days that were terrible and how did you get through it, to feelings that you didn't seem you could break through those. And so I think mentoring often assumes that you're hearing from the mentee and helping them specifically with their development plan, but part of it is also sharing your own story. So it's a big part of, my responsibility, my corporate responsibility, my leadership responsibility to find mentees and make sure that we are having very real conversations. The one thing I do stray away from is when mentoring programs are so over formalized that you're not having real dialogue with the mentees. And I think we've all seen that. So my relationships in many cases are informal. They heard about me, I heard about them, we met somehow, and then they asked me to be their mentor. But it's, I think making sure you have the active, the honest, the real dialogue about what you experience and talk to them about what they're experiencing and make that a safe place for them to talk about it. I think that's critical.
I too have also been a part of formal and informal programs, both as a mentor and as a mentee. It's just something that I feel as a leader is a personal responsibility because so many people helped me. I have to help back. I have to give back. But it has to be authentic. There has to be a trust there. It has to be able to take its own shape the way you would in any relationship. I think part of what's so powerful about being in a mentor-mentee relationship is some of what we just talked about earlier, just having that safe space to say, I'm scared about this, I'm nervous about this, how's it going to feel when I go to college or when I'm the only one in a conference room at work? And just being able to share some of those concerns and then the mentor sharing their story and how they overcame some of those challenges or dealt with those feelings. That's really, really important and something you're not going to always get in a formal, overly structured program if you can't build up that trust or that relationship.
Yeah. Jenny and Jen, you bring up really great points because as you were sharing your thoughts, I was also thinking about my mentor that I had many, many years ago. And I remember being in a class, I don't recall exactly what class, but it was a conference that we had at Wells Fargo. And it had to do with mentee-mentor relationships. And they wanted us to close our eyes and think about the one person who's made a difference throughout your life or your career. And they wanted you to close your eyes for a second. And the second, I didn't even have to close my eyes. I mean, the second that they said that person's face and name popped into my head, and it gave me the sense of joy that, I had an individual who took pride and meaningful conversations to make a difference in my personal life. And I think about him all the time. He's retired now from Wells Fargo, but he was an awesome leader. And that's why, to me, being a mentor is so critical and valuable, as I mentioned, to help our up and coming future leaders within the organization, and not just within the organization, but within our communities as well.
There's something really awesome about what all of you are sharing here. I think there's this I'm not alone feeling, right? It's like so that even when you as the mentee is receiving from this person, it's like I don't want to just receive the awesome guidelines on how you're going to have the amazing career. It's like I want to know like the dirty, messy stuff. Like I want to feel like
Right.
wait, but it feels like it's pretty difficult for me. Or it feels like it's there's some struggles here, and you can provide that perspective of like no, you're not alone. Like just because it looks like I got to this place and everything is all peachy keen, it's like not only did I have a long journey getting there, but there's still things that I'm dealing with today, right? And like that, I think that's so powerful as a mentor to be able to provide not just the sort of educational piece, as you said, but like that real world, like connective side of it as well, where you can feel like there's another human that has experienced things like me, right? That has gone through situations similar to
Mhm.
me, and that means that I can go through that too, and that's
That's
empowering.
right. I was just going to say the other thing I talk to my mentees about is, we get very wrapped up in job roles and classifications and whether we're going to get a raise and what percentage that raise can be. And I think we're so structured in that we have forgotten to ask people what they want to do. So it is core to every mentoring relationship that I have is what do you like to do? What do you want to do? What do you think you do well? And let's have conversations about how we weave that into your journey and your career path versus I want to be a business initiative consultant 3 because that would give me X percentage of a raise. We got to start talking to people and we got to make people feel comfortable saying what they want to do. We have to spend so much time in our careers and so much time at work. And somewhere along the way, we have forgotten that there is a person on the other side of a job and we need to make sure they like doing what they're doing. And so that's a
Mm,
big piece that I focus on in the mentoring relationship.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love that. I love that. It's there's something at Wells Fargo that we do called Strengths Finders so that employees
Mhm.
can figure out their top 5 strengths. And the school of thought behind that is really that why spend so much energy trying to change something that maybe you're not as good at or is a weakness or not as interesting to you? Put yourself in a situation where your strengths are an asset, where you're in a role where you
Hmm.
can bring your strengths into the position. And that I think ties into what you're saying, Jenny. It's all about what do you want to do? What are you
Mhm.
happiest doing? Because that's what you're going to be strongest at. And then
Right.
what's the right role that where you can really showcase those talents?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about passion. To me, when you have passion and what you do, and that's what gets you up every single day to do what you do. And I think we just got to continue to ensure to what everyone just mentioned is that folks are in the right role. If they're in the right role because that's what they want to do, they're going to bring passion to
Hmm.
the role and they will accelerate in the role.
I feel like this lesson starts back at the beginning of this story about education. Like, are you even passionate about the thing that you're going to go and learn about, right? And like really asking those questions at that initial onset, so that you are going through your educational process with this fever of whatever route that you take. That you're like, this is for me. This excites me, and I know why I want to do this. Right? That's the
Right.
wonderful question there. Oof. So we're almost out of time, and I want to get some takeaways from each of you. If you had to, and we're going to frame it this way, if you had to talk to young you about education, what would be the one takeaway that you would give to that little person that's you, that's about to start their journey in education? Why don't you kick us off, Jenny?
I would say back to my initial comments, focus on the front line. Focus on the customer, focus on the people serving the customer, and you're going to get the broadest level of knowledge using that approach.
I would say think of education as a journey. Try to always be a student all of your life. It's not just 4 years of college or 2 years of grad school or whatever it is. Try to challenge yourself to be in a role where you're constantly learning. And if you're not, then it's time to move on to something else. I think that's the
Mm.
greatest gift any of us can give to ourselves is just to always be learning and improving.
Wow, you mean you're never done?
You're never
I love
done.
it.
You're never done.
Awesome. Javier.
I'll just add that the importance of your day-to-day work that you do, entwine what you do and have a passion for what you're doing, but more importantly, balance that with going to get your education because that's something that I didn't do. So I
Mm.
could have taken my work life experience, right, and in the work component, and also go get my education and then be well balanced at the very end,
Ah,
and also be more marketable at the end of the day.
love it. I love it. So a little bit of both and in that case. That's great. Well, I want to thank all of my guests, Gene, Jenny, Javier, the three J's. This has been an amazing conversation. I hope you all have enjoyed it as much as I have, and look forward to the audience really soaking this up and getting this knowledge about perspectives on education.